Does that work?
Yes, it does.
Oh, good.
You're good.
All right. All right. Well, good Tuesday evening, everyone. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here as part of the Lake Michigan Bird Observatory. It's taken a little while to remember that name change there. The webinar series, I just have an absolute ton of respect for this organization, this community. I'm part of a generation that grew up under the amazing mentorship of the legends like Noel Cutright and Bill Miller and Kate Redmond and Carl Schwartz. So this organization in particular holds a special place in my life and in my heart. And I'm honored and humbled to be here with you today. Thank you for sharing your time with me this evening. This title slide is in the style of a weekly program that we coordinate the Urban Ecology Center called the Backyard Naturalist series that I'll mention briefly towards the end. And if it's a bit confusing, hopefully it'll be a little less confusing by the end. But as Jenny mentioned, I work at the Urban Ecology Center over in Milwaukee. We have neighborhood branches, 3 neighborhood branches in the city. And the mission is to connect people in cities to nature and to each other. In addition to a mission, we have a leadership that was really interested in missions and visions and statements. And so our vision is to inspire generations to build environmental curiosity, understanding, and respect. We restore hope and heal our urban natural world, neighborhood by neighborhood. And we do this under a value framework of practicing kindness, nurturing communities of belonging, caring for nature, seeking knowledge, and inspiring learning, and most importantly, through finding fun and sharing it. We do that through core programs like the neighborhood-based environmental education, community programming, land stewardship, neighborhood engagement, volunteer programs, and I am part of the research and community science team. And our goal is to support collaborative spaces for urban research between professional and community scientists. So our department studies the land through a lot of collaborative research in urban wildlife ecology and also in human dimensions of ecology. We use an adaptive management framework, and we support varied learning opportunities for the community. The core programs of the research team include wildlife monitoring, original research, either in-house or with partners. Again, the adaptive management planning in concert with our land stewardship team, and then also public programming through lectures, field trips, eco-travel, festivals, and other opportunities. And so the goal today is just to kind of look at some of the breadth of this programming as it relates to birds. And, you know, I'm talking to an audience that understands the value of birds and in our life and being outdoors, and all of the research that says being outdoors and listening to birds in particular is good for us. It's healthy for us. It makes us healthier. And so I'm going to start this particular journey by relating a couple of stories that happened to me very early in my career. So back in 2002, I had just moved back to Milwaukee after years of studying pre-montane bird communities in Costa Rica. And during my final 2 years there, I had connected with La Tirambina Rainforest, which at the time, through serendipity, was owned by the Milwaukee Public Museum. In fact, if you visit the Milwaukee Public Museum's rainforest exhibit today, you get a pretty good feel for what it's like at La Tirambina, since much of that exhibit was modeled after this particular area of Costa Rica. So I had just moved back to Milwaukee, and I approached Joan Spector, who was the former director of Tirambina, and asked if she was hiring here in Milwaukee. So I'd been working with them in Costa Rica, but their executive office was here. And she said no, because it was pretty much just her and one part-time position, and most of the jobs were down in Costa Rica. But she said, hey, you know, you should really check out this new place down the street called the Urban Ecology Center. And what they're doing in Milwaukee is very similar to the mission of Tirambina in Costa Rica. So I visited the old trailer, and it just so happened somebody was giving a talk on coffee in Costa Rica, and I met the executive director at the time, Ken Leinbach, handed him my resume, and one thing led to another. I was hired. My first 2 years were as an environmental educator, but then in 2004, the community science program coordinator moved to Florida, Jim McGinnity, and there was an opening in the research department. And so I moved in, and I've been managing this department for the past 19 years. But soon after I started back in 2004, I met with a professor at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. I'm not going to say their names out of courtesy, although they probably wouldn't mind, but I approached this particular professor about putting together a strong program in urban wildlife ecology at the Urban Ecology Center. It makes sense. And the response that I got from this professor was underwhelming, to say the least. They didn't completely discourage me from my ambitions, but essentially they said something to the effect of, nah, I really don't think you're going to get anywhere trying to study urban ecology. There's just not enough energy and excitement and resources about these degraded urban ecosystems. And they said, they didn't think it was going to work. So my first feeling was disappointment, but then that kind of led to indignation. And then I'm thinking, all right, I think you're wrong on this, you professor with your fancy PhD degree. And maybe in the end, this was a good thing, because it really caused me to kind of double down on this and really try to prove that person wrong. The reality is that I didn't have to prove them wrong. The world ended up proving them wrong, because in the ensuing couple of decades, the field of urban ecology and urban wildlife had really taken off, as they should. They kind of grew out of, I don't want to say nothing, because there were efforts, but they weren't well known. And now, they're becoming one of the hottest areas of ecological research today. So there's tons of conferences and journals, and so take that, unnamed professor. And I say that again, tongue in cheek. I really like and respect this particular professor, and I'm kind of glad that they just happen to be wrong about this. So that became urban wildlife ecology became a pretty strong focus. And then now I'm going to contrast that discouraging meeting with a very motivating meeting that happened about 7 years later. So two of my favorite people in the world, two people that have, instrumental in this organization, Bill Miller and the late Noel Cutright. And they wanted to meet with me about this idea they had about a bird and bat observatory. And they were kind of, I think, just scoping the land and seeing what was out there. And this organization that would serve an area greater than Wisconsin, this kind of Western Great Lakes states. So they want to know what people were doing, and in particular, what kind of data were out there, either legacy data or current data related to birds and bats. And I had known these two gentlemen pretty well by this point, many fruitful partnerships. But even then, when Noel Cutright sets up a meeting with you, you want to be prepared. And at this time, I had already known that getting an audience with Noel really involved. He was at all the bird conferences, and if you wanted to find him, he was always at the back, sitting in, no matter who was talking up front, he was in the back, and that's where you could go and just kind of shoot the breeze with him, with his brilliant mind and his slightly off-centered baseball cap. But so Noel and Bill wanted to know a little bit about the bird programs, a little more about not just the programs at the Ecology Center, but what were we doing with the data. And so I really spent extra time putting together this kind of shiny summary about all our international collaborations, our original research, all the really fancy stuff. And we had a good amount to share with them at that point. But then when all was said and done, at the end of that meeting, Noel said, I am not interested in all that stuff. The cutting edge work, the international work, the stuff I was really jazzed about. He practically ignored all that stuff. And he looked at me and said, Tim, the most valuable data set your organization has by far, and the one that excites me the most, is related to one particular program. And for me, this was a program that I knew very well, and it was our longest running program, and I'd kind of taken it for granted. because it was simple. There was no fancy technology, and it was a program that happened every single week. And whoops, sorry, went the wrong way. And so this is the program that Noel and Bill were really interested in.
There's walks every week, one walk a week at each of the 3 branches. At 8 o'clock in the morning, rain or shine, a group meets and walks the same route, notes how many birds they see and what the species are, and then we compile all that at the end of the walk, which takes about an hour and a half or 2 hours, depending on how good the birds are that day.
When you see a bird, your mind goes through a certain set of processes. You'll notice its overall shape and size, and that narrows down the possibilities as to what it might be. Then you notice certain more specific aspects, like the size and shape of its beak, the pattern of coloration, and all those things help you to identify the bird.
We do it out of the love of being out in nature, having the social group, collecting the data that then is used later. So we feel we're adding and contributing to science.
We sit down and discuss how many we think we saw, and that's always a lot of the fun too.
I saw 2 together. Pigeons. I saw 4 or 5 from the tower.
And then compile that and then send that into the eBird list.
A massive amount of data that just isn't possible for individual scientists or even small groups of scientists by themselves to collect.
The enthusiasm of the other volunteers and the excitement of seeing this natural world in this particular way was really infectious. And so I decided I would join in and kind of give it a try. And like many people, I got very addicted to it. It's so wonderful to see what's around us all the time that we don't even know about.
I enjoy the bird walks. I enjoy it even when the weather's not as good, although when the weather's good, it's fun.
They're beautiful. And they're very interesting. So it's just kind of exciting. Even if you've seen them many times before, it's always great.
So again, for all of the programs that I was, I thought they were really going to get, be impressed by, it was just our weekly bird walks. They started in 1998. They continued till today. That they were most excited about. And it's again, it's not fancy. It doesn't use technology. But these community scientists have been collecting 50 data sets per year, roughly. I mean, these birders are extremely hardcore, and like we'll say, please don't run the route today. That's lightning and thunder, and we don't want you to get hurt, or it's 20 below wind chill, and they still want to go. And so just about every week, 3 times a week. So yeah, roughly 50 data sets per year for 35 years straight. And Noel pointed out that those are the gold data points, because they're year-round and they're long-term. And I think the general birding community more recently has been recognizing what Noel and Bill knew back then, that like eBird is encouraging folks to pick a location and bird in that location year-round. So perhaps your backyard, but there's the fun times to bird when everybody's birding, and then there are fun places to bird that get a lot of data. But then are we also collecting the data during the times when it's not spring, not May, when the weather's not good, and locations that other birders might not be flocking to. So you're getting that is giving you power when you're looking to analyze. So that their point was well taken, that is really the most important data set that we own, and we being the world, because it's all on eBird. And so from that, we've been able to tease out some fun small stories, like local trends in birds, what's been rising, what's been decreasing, and is that following national trends or regional trends, or, the relationship between the peregrine falcon moving into its home at UWM, which resulted in a stark decrease in our sightings of rock pigeons. And you can really see the potential impact of some of these long-term data sets when you really dig into the weeds. And I'm not expecting anybody to read this, but this showed that several migrant species, it was an analysis that several migrant species were arriving 2 to 3 days earlier per year over a 10-year period using our eBird data with statistical significance, particularly the Western palm warbler and the Eastern phoebe. So, a group that started over people's love of birds, a group of locals that love to socialize, that love each other's company. One of our regular walkers says this is her church. These community scientists who love the social aspect as much as the birds are producing scientifically sound, statistically significant data around the effect of climate change on bird migration. So, it's the simplest way to connect people to birds, and it might be the most effective on many layers, and that's why they were so interested in those data sets. Bird walks are a great entry point into the world of urban birds, but it's not the only way that we monitor birds. So we've had a long-term bird banding program that's evolved over the years. It began in 2002 and continued until the pandemic year of 2020, after which it's been on a slight hiatus, but we're revamping and reimagining the program this fall with a stronger focus on the education and research value of banding. And we had a couple folks take a course up in Wolfridge, banding training, and they start off a bird banding training program saying, birds are going to get hurt, birds will die. Bird banding is a stressful experience for birds. And so it's really, the point is you're asking yourself, if you're doing this, and there are good reasons to band in my opinion, it's really important to remember what you're doing. And I think part of that is in response to some folks who were kind of doing recreational bird banding just to see what was there and not really having a research focus, and a very small minority. I'm not saying this is a big problem, but it was a problem enough for the bird banding lab to kind of crack down and really make sure that, if you're going to be banding birds and putting birds through the stress, that you have a good reason to do this. And on the education side, I am not exaggerating when I say that every year I at least get one, but usually more than one, email or letter or note that says something to the effect of, Tim, you probably don't remember me. I was a student at such and such a school, or I did the short internship with you, or a volunteer, or I was just, attending a public program. And each of those letters has something to the effect of, I held a bird and it changed my life. And again, I'm not exaggerating. This isn't just like for dramatic effect. It's very cool, and it happens quite often. And so sometimes it's the process of holding a bird, seeing a bird up close, and these people that reach me say, I changed my career because of that one experience, or this experience holding a bird brought focus to my life, and I decided to go into a career conservation or something like that. It's that societal kind of life-changing value, and the Bird Observatory is no stranger to bird banding and the power that it can have on people's lives, and don't really need to expand on this, other than we're really excited to partner with you all on the Motus Tower. And again, when we kind of put our bird banding back in place, we're really going to kind of shift the lens more towards that education and research value. And over the years, we've just had a lot of success working with partners on efforts in birds in the city. So another Bill Miller-led effort was MCAMP, which rolls off the tongue, Milwaukee County Avian Migration Monitoring Partnership, that had multiple layers, several publications, and because part of the project involves sampling bird blood for metabolites during banding, we were able to show evidence that birds put on weight more rapidly during spring migration than the fall, something that science, we probably, you know, we kind of knew that that was likely the case, but it hadn't been shown. And so that was one outcome of that project. Also showed that birds in the fall are in a little bit more of a hurry than we think, which supported some other work that winter territories can be more important than we expect them to be. And the research continues today. And so just going to talk about one of the more exciting projects that I know Renata's here, and we've been involved with the Wings project, the Wisconsin Night Guardian for songbirds, which was pretty much spearheaded, owned, and run by the Wisconsin Humane Society. It's a project designed to study the effects of particularly downtown Milwaukee on migrating birds. So we know that collisions with buildings ranks quite high when we're looking at bird mortality after habitat loss and cats on the list of reasons for mortality. We have a good idea why buildings are so good at killing birds, and there are reasons why Milwaukee in particular might be more effective at killing migrating birds. And you know, I should say this middle group of slides is borrowed heavily from the Wisconsin Humane Society. The project began more than 15 years ago, again spearheaded by the director at the time, Scott Deal, with several local partners, including the Urban Ecology Center, and started a huge volunteer base. The goals of the project, or I should say strong volunteer base. Goals of the project to create awareness around bird collisions, particularly awareness. You want that awareness to come to building owners, and that hopefully leads to action. So to document the problem in Milwaukee in particular, and to contribute to research around this issue, and then of course to save injured birds that are injured by the buildings. And programs similar to Wings, like the Audubon-led charge in Madison, has led to action, which is very promising. And then ultimately the hope is that Wings leads to safer homes, safer classrooms, campuses, buildings, again, from the bird's perspective. That program relies on the dedication and passion of community scientists who get up early in the morning to monitor buildings, and they walk prescribed routes looking for dead or injured birds, and when they come across a bird, collecting valuable data that can help shed light on the problem. And then one of the problems with the project in general was that, you know, even though it began with a coalition of partners, and I know it was featured on Outdoor Wisconsin and other news media, and there was kind of a lot of hubbub and energy around it, the lion's share, almost all of the work rested with one organization. So the Wisconsin Humane Society is one of the premier organizations naturally. The director, Crystal, is going to be talking here next, and she's amazing. They do amazing work. She, you know, we try to connect every once in a while, and she mentioned that, you know, the Wings program needed help. They are so good at their part of that project, which is saving the birds that were already injured, but they just didn't have the capacity to also do all the work around volunteer coordination and data analysis, which when you're talking about leading to actions, those are you know, the fixing the birds is important, but really the rubber's going to hit the road when you start to, you know, look at the problem. And so we had an anonymous donor put their resources towards supporting a kind of longer term, more sustainable solution, which then enabled the Urban Ecology Center to put staff time into volunteer coordination, data analysis, which are some, you know, huge pillars of the project. And then it, you know, you start to get towards what partnerships are. You know, you more than one organization working together and bringing their own particular strengths to a project. And so we pretty much, you know, went for a revamping of the project, starting with, most importantly, the the current dedicated volunteer base. That was the first group we brought in. You know, they just gave us super valuable feedback on what was working, what wasn't working, the best practices. And then we also brought in Madison Audubon for some conversations, and WSO and Brian Lenz over at ABC. And then so from all of that, we decided, well, let's, you know, in its current iteration, it was fairly spread out. And so we decided from a data perspective, it'd be good to focus on one route at first that encompassed a couple of buildings that we suspected or knew to be problems. After talking to some of the volunteers, we decided, you know, maybe which buildings might be good or not good to include. One of the buildings was already pretty much not a problem according to the efforts, and so we didn't really need to focus on that one. And so that core of volunteers really enabled us to expand and bring in a new group of volunteers, new energy, and the end result was that we had they had 2 volunteers out every single morning from April 17th to May 31st. And so partnering up and having a morning so that, you know, if you were a volunteer, then maybe you're Monday morning. And so you go every Monday morning with again, another volunteer for safety in for the most part. And so now we have geospatial data that we're analyzing, and that group is meeting tomorrow to kind of go over this first round of data analysis and plan for the next season, and also start thinking about, you know, the message that we're going to bring to the building owners and conversations that we're going to have. So, you know, trying to keep the messages positive, and also, like, you don't have to do everything to your building. Here are some areas that really need, you know, attention. So then that essentially took that extra work out of the hands of the Humane Society. They are still doing what they do best. They are still rehabbing the injured birds. It's that part is still happening. And it's obviously, you know, more complex, but it's partnering and spreading the energy and allowing different people and organizations to work on their strengths was huge. And yeah, so the WHS continued in their role of rehab. We just got back from the International Urban Wildlife Conference in DC and presenting this the wings revamp. And then this also allowed us to network with other folks working on the same problem. And then some other kind of, I don't know, fantastic in my estimation, hot off the press news about Bird City, another program that I know you all are very familiar with. And in this case, the Urban Ecology Center and the Bird City program was in a similar position to the Humane Society was in Wings. So since its induction into the annals of bird cities, pretty much the lion's share of the efforts to maintain the bird city status and to work on it was done by the Urban Ecology Center. It's not a terrible thing, but it really didn't hit, you know, the spirit and true intentions of what it means to be a bird city. So you know, we were coordinating the efforts, and apart from one alder person that was helping us pass the resolution every year, very few government officials knew A, what a bird city was, and B, that Milwaukee was a bird city. So, you know, like the Humane Society, we reached out and said we needed help, and we really couldn't do all the things, and it wasn't very effective that we were doing all the things. And we had reached out a few times in the past with kind of little success. And again, that type of work isn't my strength. But this time we finally found the right supporter. So recently elected Alderman John Brostoff was just super enthusiastic. I just remember putting together an email to him, and his response was like, heck yeah, let's do this. And, you know, he was confused as to why Milwaukee as a government didn't seem to either know about this or care about it. And then he and another birder, Jeff Bentoff, really pulled together a meeting that couldn't have been more effective. So we had folks from the Sunday Birders, a local birding group, Friends of Lakeshore State Park, other friends groups. We got the ear of ECO, the sustainability office in Milwaukee. And now we are at the point of handing off this entire project over to Visit Milwaukee, which is a city agency, which is where it should have been from the beginning, so that the Bird City will now live with a government agency. And then it allows the rest of us, the supporting people and organizations, to really do what we do best in supporting that collaborative effort. Where teamwork makes the dream work. So now Bird City Milwaukee has a Facebook group, regular meetings, and momentum, and just super excited that it will soon be run by Visit Milwaukee. It's going to have its own page on the city tourism group. I think it helps when they kind of understood the multi-billion-dollar industry that birding is, and then ABC again just recently launched the Bird City Network. So it's just really good timing, and it's a little bit of a sigh of relief from UEC, because now it's really it's being what Bird City meant to be, and this has all just been happening within the last few months, and it's really exciting. And then one more kind of really interesting bird-related story to the efforts of urban research and conservation in particular, is represented by this dick sisel. So about 3 weeks ago, we had our first dick sisel sighting in Milwaukee, and not in Milwaukee, but in one of our 3 parks. So the 3 parks of the Urban Ecology Center: Riverside Park, Washington Park, and Three Bridges Park, which is a city-owned park. And so those are the 3 parks that we've been monitoring, for decades, for birds. And through all of that effort, we never had a dick sisel. One of the things that we are working on is adaptive management for urban lands. And essentially, so we have a research department, monitoring department, working with the land stewardship team, creating management plans that are based on what we want, what we're finding. It's kind of that iterative process to land management. And so we worked with a University of Wisconsin Nelson fellow who spent a lot of time with us putting together an adaptive management plan, and really kind of helped focus what we wanted to monitor. We already had these really good long-term bird data. We're complementing that now with increased efforts in Lepidoptera, in butterflies and moths. So that's, they're primary consumers of the plants, and as a group, we want to monitor everything. We have limited resources, and birds absolutely make sense. So what's another group that we can monitor that will effectively complement birds? There's dragonflies, there's most of them are in the insect world, and we're already doing some of that, but we decided that butterflies would be a really good. People know about them, they've got that same kind of draw to the public as birds do when you're working with insects in particular, which tend to be less sexy, but butterflies are very sexy. So that was part of the plan, was to kind of bring in a new monitoring group. And then also we identified some target species. And one of the target species we had identified 2 years ago was the dick sisel. And I have to admit, when we put that on our list of target species, I was playing the role of this UWM professor. I was pretty skeptical. I was like, yeah, I'm sure we can target dick sisels, but we're never going to get them, and so when we did get one a few weeks ago, I still had my skeptic hat on, and I was like, okay, well, yes, we got one bird during migration. That is really exciting, because we hadn't seen, most of the migrating birds we've seen at some point or another in the past 20 or 30 years between those 3 parks. Just by doing all of that work, that effort, you're going to get a rare bird every once in a while. But we had never had a dickcissel, so it was pretty exciting just on its own to get a dickcissel, and you know, with the birding data, we're able to look at trends and biodiversity trends, and so it was exciting. I was definitely excited, and I thought, okay, this is going to be one of those one-time data points. You know, we can talk about it for years, how cool it was that we saw a dickcissel. And, you know, dickcissels are present in Milwaukee County. It's not that strange, but for our small urban, small size savannas and prairies, that's what caused my skepticism. And then the next week we found another one, and not only did we find one, we found a pair, and the next week that pair was back there again. It doesn't mean, and then the next week our bird campers found it again. So it doesn't mean they were successful breeders, but it is definitely to see a pair in a habitat during that, you know, that crucial time frame. That is a big deal. And so, you know, will we see him again next year? Maybe not, but that is a pretty big, you know, well, we are now managing habitat that potentially could support this bird. So all our work identified it as a target species, and then it was really cool just in the last few months to find it. And so I'll end with where we began. So one of the other entryways into birds is getting out where you want people to be out and to see them. But then there's also the learning part, and you know, whether it's taking a class, whether it's taking, you know, a bird ID class. During the pandemic, or when the pandemic started, our programming shift, like many organizations, went from outside to inside. And we started right away started a weekly virtual program to keep our community together. And it was a scary time, we all remember. And not only to keep that group together, but okay, well, they're saying it's not safe for us to congregate in our parks anymore, to be together in our parks, and we didn't know at the time. So, but you know, particularly if you're living, you know, wherever you are, you probably have a backyard or a patio or some kind of local contact point with nature. And so we really started, okay, we're not all in the same places together. Let's focus on our collective backyards and study those together. So every week we focused on a new kind of like a common organism in our backyards, and then you realize how freaking cool these common animals are when you really look at it, you know. So we started with, and the urban cowbird is, we started early on having kind of a movie theme. So we had Desperate House Sparrows and you know, House of Cardinals and Starling Wars, and kind of playing on the movie theme. A lot of birds early, and again, just looking at these local common birds. There's some really cool stories. And with squirrels, chipmunks, we started branching out to the fungi, to the bacteria, to, you know, the smell of rain. And then we started getting some really cool guest speakers. And it's a program that's been going every Friday morning at 9 a.m. and we're going in our 5th season. So it's, even though we are back outside studying birds in their habitat, there was quite a few folks that wanted us to continue with this, either because they're not in Milwaukee or it's just harder for them to get out. And so I invite you all, if they're free, every Friday morning at 9 a.m. and next week. So they're still focused on the backyard naturalist, but we've kind of branched out. So we've got professors talking about soil, or you know, even like salmon aren't particularly in your backyard, but you know, they're in our backyards and our rivers. And next week, Amanda Tokiyama, our GIS coordinator, is going to talk about teeth and bones. So, you know, you could find teeth and bones in animals that, you know, died in your backyard. We often focus on astronomical events, and it's really fun. So I encourage you, if you're interested, again, it's free every Friday morning at 9 a.m. We just get together and talk about something cool, and some really great speakers. So I think I'll end here, and thank you so much. Again, I'll stop. I'll try to figure out how to stop sharing my screen here.
All right, thank you, Tim. That was a wonderful presentation. I hadn't realized how much is going on in Milwaukee, just to understand what's happening with our local birds. And yeah, like you said, there's a lot of history there, and it's also just a great gateway into the natural world, because we're all affected by birds, we're all hearing them. And I think during the pandemic, a lot of people discovered the Merlin app and really went with that. So there's a lot of interest right now in birding, and you know, and it leads to other interests, you know, like your Friday morning group. So thank you so much for sharing all of this.
Yeah, well, I'm really, really happy to be here with this group, and yeah, if it wasn't evident, I love you guys. So
Well, thank you. I'm glad you knew Noel Cutright. So yeah. I was curious, you mentioned the change in urban ecology or urban wildlife ecology, and how that initial professor really discouraged you. And then over the course of a couple years, you know, the number of years, there was a shift. Do you any ideas what accounts for that shift in interest in urban ecology? And was it just sort of a natural evolution, do you think, or?
I don't know. I mean, it happened, and I'm excited that it happened, and it's really an exciting field. But I don't know what caused that shift. It was, you know, part of it for me was a recognition that as an ecologist, like, the human dimensions of wildlife are so important. And in cities, you know, you have a lot of the field came from LA. I mean, that's a stronghold of this field, you know, where you go outside and you might have a, you know, mountain lion, you know, and so a lot of the field is driven in that area, and kind of the celebrity mountain lion, was it PS22, that all of, like, the you know, Hollywood stars rallied around. And but I don't know what triggered it, but I'm just happy to be riding the wave.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Good. And I know we said people could put questions in the chat, but I think people can unmute themselves and we can have it be a little more conversational if that works for people. So yeah, feel free to chime in with some questions for Tim, or comments and observations as well. So
Yeah, and I know Renata's here, and I'm just a total fan. I don't know if you can hear me. I'm sure you can, but you know, to people that have been really putting the effort into these projects for a long time, and yeah.
Hey Tim, thanks. This is Renata. I did have a question. That dick thistle. Oh, it was so cool when you showed that. I mean, I also volunteer at the Mequon Nature Preserve, and there's a dick thistle up there that I see almost every week. So I was a little surprised when you said that there wasn't one. Of course, that's a much bigger piece of land than your three UEC locations. But which UEC location had the dick thistles? Curious.
It was at Riverside Park. And yeah, we don't, I mean, if I just go to the county grounds, which is not far from here, I can get dick thistles regularly. But for some reason, I mean, you know, they are grassland specialists, so it makes sense. And so, you know, you go up to Haven Woods, you can get them, of course, Mequon Nature Preserve. But yeah, we just, for all that time and effort, we'd never had one.
Tim, I was wondering, with, you know, the kind of rare sighting of bobolink at your specific Dixisel at your specific location there, what kind of occurrence did bobolink have, and like other grassland specialists, and maybe even like you've ever gotten like a western meadowlark or anything like that?
I mean, so we really focus, part of our habitat focus, it's a little interesting because we have pretty small areas. One of our, so Riverside Park is mostly forest, and it was mostly forest historically. You know, so we're creating some savanna, partly because savanna is so endangered. And functionally it's small, so we're not expecting much from it. But even in, you know, we did have eastern meadowlarks. We've never had western meadowlarks. That's pretty rare, you know, for our area. Again, you don't have to go too far to see some of these things. So when we got a shrike, you know, kind of an open bird predator, every once in a while when we see those, it is pretty cool. And it just, you know, it's kind of like, I mean, Riverside Park, it is an arboretum, and an arboretum is, we really focus on kind of like, here are the habitats that could be here, even if that's what they want to be. So there's kind of that education focus. But even with that little focus, if you are able to, you know, attract some of these grassland birds, it's a bonus for sure. And the beavers are coming back, and they're causing changes that, you know, would have been happening too. That caused us to change our management plan, because now you know, it also gives us an opportunity to do some pretty cool studies. But some of the trees that we wanted to plant along some areas, we knew were going to get destroyed, and so maybe we should invest in some different trees, or, you know, give the beavers what they want. And then that's going to affect the birds that come. So did that answer your question? I hope that was
Yeah, it's just neat to hear the different, like, I guess, more infrequent visitors visiting your location. And I guess when you see those visitors, it lets you kind of know you've done something right too. Kind of gives you some encouragement.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it is very cool. And again, it's, you know, I go back to that professor who just like, well, this is Milwaukee, this is downtown Milwaukee, and there is a history of abuse of the environment. And then there's just a lot of organizations that, you know, River Revitalization Foundation and the River Greenway and Milwaukee Riverkeeper and Nearby Nature. If you haven't heard of or from them, I mean, they're awesome. They're also one of my favorite organizations, doing really good work in degraded habitats that have had a lot of abuse. And so, yeah, it is really cool when you start to get these success stories. The beaver was a really fun one, and otters are starting to come back too now. So, you know, 15 years ago, we had our first beaver sighting in talking to locals that, you know, they can remember for a long time. And you saw one, and then a few years pass and you see another, and then all of a sudden they start to become more regular, and then all of a sudden they're cutting down the trees, and we found their you know, den in the bank. And a local reporter said, hey, can we go see a beaver? And I said, well, you know, we can go out in a canoe and look for them, but I don't think the chances are very good that we'd find them. And sure enough, we went out, and you know, there's not a lot of boat traffic on the Milwaukee River at dusk up in this area. And yeah, we saw beaver, and otters are coming back, bald eagles are coming back. It's really, maybe, you know, to your question, Jenny, maybe that's part of it, is like, people are just recognizing that you can heal the land, and these cool wildlife will come back, and then they're going to cause problems too, right? Coyotes are going to attack pets, and beavers are going to cut down trees, and you know, so part of that is maybe by necessity of the human wildlife interactions.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll open up, see if we have other questions, comments. Yeah, and observations, as I mentioned. It's been I think one of the important things about what's happening in urban areas is just, like I said, it's just an avenue to get people involved. And so I think when you understand better, like what can happen in an urban environment, then when you get into more sort of a larger habitat area, not only do you recognize the species, but you understand how larger acreage can work, on a functional level. And you sort of recognize you're not, you get to that place and you recognize pieces of it, which helps you understand the importance. And then, that sort of translates into conservation in my mind.
And you all have, I agree with all that. And you all have one of the better success stories too of the golf course transition into an amazing habitat. You go from very low wildlife value to very high wildlife value. And it's a suburban or exurban habitat, but it's also the transition, and it's just fun to see what happens.
Yeah. And I think it also gives a window into like these processes that go on around us that we may or may not be aware of, like migration. The birds passing through Milwaukee. It's impressive.
Yeah, definitely. And hopefully with this bird city, I mean, like people, I don't know if this is still true, but Bill Miller said it was, and I always trust Bill Miller. But he said historically, the site with the highest historical diversity in the state of Wisconsin is the Coast Guard impoundment downtown Milwaukee. So it was that rare, like it's on the lakefront. It was dredging, created this nice wetland. It's filled in now, but you talk about like rare birds, and it's not functional for really breeding or anything. But you start to get people like to see birds, and if they can just go down to the lakefront, and this place that was not created for bird habitat suddenly becomes this gold mine. Yeah.
All right. Okay, we've got a couple minutes left, but if anyone else would like to chime in, this is a good time to do it. We appreciate everybody attending, and this has been a wonderful presentation. We really appreciate your time, Tim, and everybody's time coming and joining in on this.
Thanks again for having me. I'm very happy to be here, and look forward to continuing to work with you all, especially with the Modus towers.
Absolutely.
It will be in touch soon, Tim.
Sounds good, Jacob.
All right. Thank you, everybody. And we look forward to our next presentation on August 9th, and we hope to see you there. So thank you.
And she's fantastic, so definitely come to that one.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. Thank you, Tim.
Bye, everybody.